the very first sentence of the 14th Amendment, written during Reconstruction, guaranteeing that people born or naturalized in the United States are United States citizens. Sherilyn Ifill holds the Vernon Jordan Chair in Civil Rights at Howard University, where she is launching the 14th Amendment Center for Law and Democracy. She was previously the president and director counsel for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and she joins me now. I don't think the judge's order was wholly unexpected today because of the egregiousness of the executive order. And yet, you never know these days, your reaction to what the judge had to say and the fact that they have, in fact, halted it.
Good evening, Chris. Thanks so much for having me on. Well, first and foremost, the people challenging Trump's executive order are on the offensive, which means they get to pick the place where they filed the case. So this did not end up in Judge Kaczmarek's court or Eileen Cannon's court. Instead, the plaintiffs obviously chose places where they believed they could get a fair hearing. And it is a no-brainer, Chris, of course, that an executive order cannot overturn a provision of our Constitution. Just forget about what the provision says. Let's leave out birthright citizenship for the moment. There's just an imbalance here, right, that the Constitution is our founding document, and its provisions cannot be overturned by an executive order. So a president can no better, declare that there will no longer be a First Amendment or that the First Amendment will only extend to actual citizens of the country or people who've been here for a certain number of years. Simply cannot be done just as a matter of symmetry of power. And I think that's what the judge was referring to when he said, he can't imagine a more egregiously kind of unconstitutional proposal because that symmetry is there. That being said, obviously, Trump has talked about this for a long time. He ran on the idea of getting rid of birthright citizenship. And for years, I've been saying that the Republicans have almost talked themselves into the fever dream. We've heard it from Lindsey Graham and other senators who've constantly said, we have to overturn birthright citizenship. And I've always said, OK, great. Are you calling a constitutional convention? Are you planning to amend the Constitution? Right. But they have talked about it as though birthright citizenship is a policy choice, and it is not a policy choice. It is a constitutional imperative. It is the first line of the 14th Amendment of our Constitution. It was created to ensure that Black people, both free and formerly enslaved, would be citizens, and that all who are born in this country or naturalized are citizens of this country, and that cannot be overturned by executive order.
I thought what the judge had to say, and this was interesting because something you've spoken a bit about is the sort of responsibilities of members of the bar and legal ethics. Yeah. And the judge said something pretty spicy about this. Yeah. He said, frankly, I have difficulty understanding how a member of the bar could state unequivocally that this is a constitutional order. It just boggles the mind. Coming close to saying that you're sort of flirting with a violation of your oath by even coming into my court with this.
Well, I thought that was interesting as well, Chris. Of course, as lawyers, we are permitted to push against laws that we believe are unconstitutional or seek to change the law. But you do have to have a well-founded argument, right? Because you don't just get to walk up into court and say anything you want to. You actually have to follow the law, which is the whole point of being a lawyer. But if you are challenging what you believe is an unjust law or challenging the interpretation of a law, you have to have a well-founded basis for it. And there are, if you look at the advisory committee notes regarding filing complaints, Rule 26, there are some things that they suggest you might want to have in your pocket as a way of showing that you have a well-founded basis for seeking to overturn that law or to challenge the interpretation of the law. This is early days yet. This was just, a very early motion. And so we haven't seen all the things that the now Justice Department will be claiming justify this new interpretation, justify the Supreme Court jettisoning its 100 years of interpretation. But I think the judge's question was a shot across the bow to lawyers to say, you better come with it and not just sally forth into this court and waste our time.
Another provision of the 14th Amendment is a provision that explicitly contemplates insurrectionists and what to do with people that were guilty of it. Including barring them from office. And the pardoning of insurrectionists was actually an enormous question before the country back in the wake of the Civil War and Reconstruction. We saw enormous mass pardoning of insurrectionists, I think it's fair to say, including people convicted of the most serious of these, seditious conspiracy yesterday. 2 days ago. I want to just play for you what Officer Michael Fanone, of course, who was beaten on the steps of the Capitol, had to say tonight to my colleague Joy Reid about those pardons. Take a listen.
This is part of his plan. The plan is to pardon those that committed crimes on his behalf, because he knows that that will send a message to the citizens of this country. If you commit crimes on my behalf, I support you.
What do you think of that?
I thought it was incredibly powerful. And you'll remember, Chris, we can take this all the way back to 2015 during Trump's original campaign when he said at his rallies, you know, punch him out, right, to people who were protesting. Punch him out and I'll take care of your representation, right? I'll pay for your lawyers. You know, this is something Trump has done. And it is because he wants to know that he has a kind of army, a kind of group of brown shirts who will support him, who will show fealty to him and show fealty to him to the point of violence. And I think that Michael Fanone is correct. And it is incredibly frightening, but I think that is true. And this is an important moment, I think, that we should not let go past very quickly, the pardoning of all of the January 6th convicts, particularly those who assaulted police officers. We have been browbeaten by the Republican Party for years, who have set police officers above the law, who have said we cannot question their conduct, who have said they are heroes, who have said we cannot come against them, and to do so is somehow unpatriotic. And here we have a president pardoning people who assaulted, beat, harmed, and committed acts that resulted in the death of police officers trying to protect the Capitol. We should never let Trump forget that. And I think he knows that this story is dangerous to him. And that is why you may have seen, Chris, yesterday, this plan to create their own January 6th committee. So the pardons aren't enough. He has to also try to recreate the narrative. He has to try to lost cause January 6th and suggest that what we saw with our own eyes was not true. So it's very, very serious indeed.
Yeah, an interesting historical note that we should just bring up is that much of the worst violence in the reign of terror in the South after Reconstruction was committed by insurrectionists, by people who had taken up arms against the U.S. government, were never punished or held to account, and then they did other things as well. Sherilyn Ifill, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
Coming up, at least 2 Republicans now voting against Trump's Pentagon pick.